Now is the time and day for the regular board meeting, Wednesday, May 15th at 5 o'clock for the board meeting for the Vallecitos Water District. Can we have the Pledge of Allegiance by Mr. Sanoa? Director Sanoa.
Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and call for a roll call. Press your buttons if you're here. If you're not here, don't press it.
All are here.
Okay, we have a full house. I need a motion to adopt the agenda for the regular meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Public comment? I don't have any speaker slips for public comment. Okay, we'll move it to a thing. Introduction. We have Bridget back with us again. Thank goodness you saved us from a really bad presentation.
I'm glad I could help.
Thank you, thank you.
So I'd like to introduce our newest employee today, Ted Dakota. He was hired on May 6th as the electrical instrumentation technician. That position was vacant due to a recent retirement. Prior to joining the district, Ted worked for almost 10 years for the city of San Diego. In his free time, he enjoys golfing and camping, as well as spending time with his family. He has 2 children and another on the way in July.
Great.
This is Ted.
So Ted, where do you live?
Up in Valley Center.
Oh, beautiful up there.
Yeah.
Got big acreage?
2 acres.
That's enough. That's big.
Nice and quiet.
It's a lot of mowing. Did you just leave the city and city of San Diego and come with us, or were you somewhere else in between?
Yeah, after interviewing, within 2 weeks when I came here.
Oh, great, great. Well,
Short commute.
welcome aboard. Thank you very much. Okay, we have a consent calendar. No, we don't. We have presentations. We have a presentation.
You want to turn over to me?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take the next item. So one of the most important things we do here at Vallecitos is to make sure all of our employees work in a safe environment. And we do that through proper training, giving them the proper equipment and supplies. But most importantly, we listen to our employees. And I think our staff knows best the safety hazards they face and what they can do to work in a more safe environment. And recognizing this, the Aqua JPIA, which is our insurance provider, they developed a program that allows its member agencies a way to better promote safe workplaces and practices. And the program that they developed is called the HR LaBounty Safety Award Program. And how it works is that a member agency can submit ideas for a safer work environment to Aqua JPIA. Aqua JPIA takes all those ideas and they decide which ones were the best ideas and they issue awards. Usually the member agency will have already implemented this idea in their own workplace before they submit it to Aqua JPIA. The good thing about that is it helps recognize the efforts of the member agencies, but it also gets to share those good ideas with other member agencies and makes all the work zones safer throughout the Aqua JPIA area. So I'm proud to announce that one of our employees was recently awarded the LaBounty Award for Safety. Diane, if you can bring up that picture, please.
Do you have it on there?
Okay.
Okay.
You can just sling it up there. All right, so the board may recognize this picture. This is a Google Maps picture taken of Lift Station 1, taken from San Marcos Boulevard. What Lift Station 1 does is it diverts sewer flows to Meadowlark Reclamation Facility so that we can produce recycled water. But in order to divert those flows, our employees have to get out, not in the roadway, but adjacent to the roadway to turn the valves. So if you look on the kind of bottom right corner of this photo, you can see the above ground concrete structure. And that's the valving structures that the employees have to get to. And it's really adjacent to San Marcos Boulevard for the westbound traffic. High speed, high volume roadway, so very dangerous place. So Jeremy Scott, our senior wastewater collections, one of our senior wastewater collections worker, he came up with a great idea to install bollards adjacent to the work zone, and those are those 4 yellow posts that you see adjacent to there. So what those do is they protect the workers and the equipment in the event that there's an errant vehicle that runs off of the road and would encroach on the work zone. Thankfully, we haven't had to experience whether the bollards are effective or not, but I'm sure they would be, and it would provide a much more safe work zone. So I'd like to invite Jeremy to come on up. So Jeremy, if you can come on up, and President Martin, if you can come down and present Jeremy with the La Bounty Safety Award from Aqua JPIA. And it also comes with a little gift on the back, too.
One of us needs to lose weight.
So Jeremy, why don't you come up front and leave that, and get a picture, someone can take.
If I could quickly just ask, wouldn't you have thought this had already been invented? I'm always amazed at how people in an environment live in that environment for years before someone says, oh, I have an idea. That's really wonderful. I just,
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, in this day and age, half the people are not really paying attention as much as
they
should
used
be.
to, yes.
And, it just takes a split second for things to change, so I figured that's,
Great
Jeremy,
idea,
you've received
Jeremy.
this before, haven't you?
yes, I have.
Yeah,
Keep up the good work.
Not for the same thing.
No,
now 1,600 people that are there, and Jeremy was one of 15 to get this award. So bollard makes sense. But some of the other things you did were like covers.
Yeah, I did a non-trip cover for a vent structure for carbon odor release,
Right.
and it's working out so far so good.
Are you retired now? You're working on it.
One day at a time.
Well, congratulations, here's a check.
Okay,
Doesn't feel that heavy, but it's heavier than an empty envelope.
well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
All
We
right.
appreciate it.
All right.
Who's going to follow to get you a check? Very cool.
Yeah.
Good idea. By the way, while the picture's still up, I really want to thank staff for totally on its own revamping that. I don't know if many of you remember what that used to look like out there, but it looked like it was in the worst part of town.
Diane, can you bring that video, the picture back?
Yeah, so I mean, the work that's been done to make that look very presentable on San Marcos Boulevard, that was very applauded. And who was the gentleman that came up with that?
I think it was Jose.
Jose Mendoza.
Yeah, Jose Mendoza.
He should have gotten an award for beautification, because it looked really bad before, so that's a great job. Thank you. Okay. Now,
Were you grabbing
We have a video.
we have a video, okay, I'm thinking Chris Robbins. We have a video to show San Marcos High School Future Fair.
So Chris isn't here tonight, but Bridget's going to give a little context for the video.
Bridget twice.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm here twice, yes.
Who's the
So
guy sitting in the back of the truck? That's what I want to know.
I will tell you
Okay.
in just a moment. On April 24th, the district participated in the San Marcos Future Fair at San Marcos High School. The event
It was put on by a local nonprofit, San Marcos Promise, and it was meant to showcase the career opportunities for students and probably more importantly for students' parents. Staff from collections, we had Brian Fonseca and Dennis Richardson, as well as water operations, which was Richie Arbayo. They volunteered to man the Vallecitos booth. During the event, they demonstrated some of their lab tests and showed off some of their equipment. HR, myself, and public information were there to answer more general questions about the district and the recruitment process. I'll show the video first, which Alicia Yerman in the Public Information Department created, and then I'll answer any questions.
public agency, so you take care of everyone's water. So the water that we drink from the tap, the water you take a shower with.
And that's my job, is to monitor the water, make sure that it's safe to drink.
So what did you like go to school for to do that?
I went, there's some classes that they offer at Palomar.
So let's say you wanted to go to a community college and maybe you just want to see what you want to do. I mean, it's really good because you can just go for a semester and then you can get the certs. I mean, so you can get either go into wastewater or you can go into introductory classes for water, which is like distribution classes and stuff like that.
And there's an internship that you can join once you get out of high school, that's by the Water Authority. And they send you to work at different districts and you're getting paid when you're going to school, you're doing that.
The great thing about working for a water district, you can come on the trade side of, taking some of those classes and getting the state certs. But you also can then in turn go back and get your bachelor's degree. And maybe you could do something like engineering, or you can go into human resources, or you can go in other areas that you actually need a degree in. You want to take maybe one water class and one wastewater class and see which one you like more. One you may like better than the other.
Nice job. I mean, you have a job for every day.
Very nice.
Very nice.
Any questions?
I noticed Alicia cut out before you showed it. She's probably the most private person around. She's great. Great job.
I just had one quick, if I may.
Sure.
I was wondering how many students come through, and do they already have an inclination towards this, or are they coming in totally unaware of the water world as a source of a career?
This was the first future fair that they had held, so we didn't have as many students probably as were expected. Most of them had no idea this was a career opportunity, and which was kind of part of the whole point of the fair. There were a lot of different industries there that were represented that most people hadn't heard of.
That's really cool.
We kind of grabbed them on their way out, and so we'll find another spot next year.
Looked like you had great speakers representing our district too.
We did.
Those are all easy talkers.
Yes.
Really good. Thank you.
Is that it? Director Sinella? Yep.
Just thank you to you, Bridget, for being out there with the team, and I know our PR team's not here, and I've said it almost every time they present something, but the level of the quality of what they're putting together in recent years has really just taken off like a rocket, and it's good quality public outreach that's beneficial and valuable to those we're engaging with. In this case, it happened to be our youth, which is certainly an important sector of the community that we want to talk about, and we do know that we do have not just here in Vallecitos, but in the greater water industry, a lot of retirements, kind of an aging workforce. So getting the youth energized and excited about the opportunities within the water sector is very important. So thank you for the efforts that the entire team has put forth.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Great
you.
presentation, thank you. Before we move on to the consent calendar, I want to bring up, I don't see anyone in the audience that's here for item 2.4, but we're going to hold it off to another meeting because Chris Robbins is unable to be here. He's the one defending. So moving along to consent calendar, need a motion
Move to approve the consent calendar.
and a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous? All right, we'll move to action item. Item 2.1.
Could you put that in? Yeah. There we go. All right, I'll take that item. So the item before the board right now is the consideration of the Encino Wastewater Authority fiscal year 2020 budget. As the board knows, Vallecitos is a member agency of the Encino Wastewater Authority. The upside is they treat the majority of our wastewater and disposal for us, and the downside is we have to pay a significant portion of the costs there. What I'm going to show you is excerpts from the presentation that EWAB gave to its board. And as you also know, we have two representatives, President Martin and Director Hernandez are on the EWAB board, so they've seen this information before. So if mine working? Can you advance it one then? Okay, so this is just their cover slide, so James, if you can go to the next one. So EWA has a multi-step budget approval process. So first of all, they run the budget, they create it internally, then they run it through the member agency general manager, so I was involved in that process. Then they take it through their policy and finance committee meetings, and then they take it to their capital improvement committee. Then they eventually take the item to their board, and then the board makes a recommendation to the joint advisory committee, and then ultimately the joint advisory committee sends it out to the member agencies for their approval. So back on April 24th, the EWA Board of Directors and the Joint Advisory Committee heard this, they approved the budget, and they recommended that the budget be sent to the member agencies for their approval. The EWA bylaws basically say it has to be unanimous approval, so there's 6 member agencies for the Encina Wastewater Authority. All 6 have to approve it for the item to be approved. So EWA has set aside the month of May and June for the agencies to take their action. Tonight is Vallecitos' action. And then in July, they will take the appropriations request forward to the EWA board, so they'll actually appropriate the money that was approved in the budget. Next slide. So I'm going to actually cover 3 components of their budget. One is the operating program, the other is the capital budget, and then we'll talk about the CalPERS pension funding policy. So on this first slide, this is just kind of demonstrates the different categories. I'll spend a little time to walk you through this. If you look at the column on the left, these are the different categories of classes. The very first item is the Encina Water Pollution Control Facility. That's the main plant. That's where all the treatment occurs. The next one is the Source Control Program, and that's where they help work with local industries to make sure that the wrong stuff isn't being put down into the sewers. Those first 2, the Encina Water Pollution Control Facility and the Source Control Program, they help all member agencies. All 6 member agencies participate in that. The other 5 below that, there's 4 pump stations and a recycled water facility that are built specifically for individual or a couple of member agencies. Vallecitos doesn't share in any of those 5. So the Agua Hedionda pump station, the Buena Vista pump station, Buena Creek pump station, the Raceway pump station, and the Carlsbad water recycling facility, all of those costs are being borne by those agencies that benefit from them, which is mostly Vista, Buena Sanitation, and the city of Carlsbad that benefits from those. The first column, or the second column I should say, just shows the actual costs in fiscal year 2018 for Encina. The next column shows the current year, fiscal year 2019 budget. The next one is the proposed budget, and this is what our board is being asked to approve tonight. And James, if you can click the button once. And what I want you to focus on is the majority of the costs, about a little over 80% of EWA's budget is in the Encina Water Pollution Control Facility. So I want to show that the change from fiscal year 19 budget to the proposed 2020 budget, EWA's costs are going up by about $667,000, which is a 5.1% increase. We'll talk a little bit about that later. James, you can go ahead and click on it. So the source control, this is the program I mentioned that they go out and they actually have people that go out and they do inspections and they make sure that the permitted industries are complying. That program is going up by $177,000. That's 23.6%. You can click the next one. And the reason for the big increase is they're actually recommending they add an inspector. And the reason they're doing that is because compliance reporting has become increasingly difficult. The number of permits they handle has gone up about 3-fold since they last added another inspector. And there's a new program by the Environmental Protection Agency called the dental amalgam rule. And this applies to dentists who, when they deal with fillings that have mercury, they need to make sure that those mercury fillings aren't being put in the wastewater stream. So they have a program that has to include this now too. So that's really increasing their costs. So James, you can go ahead. So operating budget summary. So what I showed you on the slides 2 previously, it showed you the money they need to bring in. You can go back to where you were. So if you notice that they want to increase their, the total budget is at the bottom. Can you click once? So that circled one, it shows that their net operating expenses, they need to bring in a little over $17 million. What it doesn't say is where does that come, who does it come from? This is how they'll spend it, but which of the 6 agencies? So if you click on the next one. So this next one shows, if you can click one more time, that same number, 17,225,000, this is showing you where that money's coming from. So what this shows for the 2020 proposed budget for the 6-member agency, how those costs are being allocated. And James, if you can click once more. If you'll notice for Vallecitos, our proposed costs for 2020 are about 2.7 million, which is actually a $51,000 decrease over the year before, which is about 1.9% less. If you look at the other member agencies, Encinitas is the only other agency that actually saw a decrease in their costs. Everybody else's costs went up. City of Vistas, their costs increased by almost 19%. So we're doing a good job here, and I think Encina recognizes that. So if you can click that. So that's the operating budget. So we'll talk about the capital budget, and it's kind of a similar story. So this is the 4 main categories that they allocate their capital expenses towards. They have the Encina Water Pollution Control Facility capital improvements. These are the big projects that they do. Planned asset rehabilitation and replacement. This is if they have to replace a motor control or something on the smaller end. And capital acquisition is a much smaller acquisition of parts and supplies and things like that. Focusing on the top line, the capital improvements, although their capital improvement program seems large, you look at FY 2020, they're proposing $17 million expenditures. That's actually $3 million less than it was in the current year. So their capital costs, although large, are going down. So a decrease of 14.3%. James. So click one more, please. So this is kind of where those $17.6 million are going to be spent throughout the plant. They're going to spend on primary treatment, secondary treatment, the outfall, anaerobic and aerobic digestion of the solids. No money this year in the biosolids program, small amount of money in their energy program, and about $5 million on general plant upgrades. So similar to what I did on the operating, I want to show who's paying those costs. So of that $17 million, who's picking up those costs? And if you can look at this one and click it once more, I think. So similar to the story with the operating, Vallecitos' cost for the capital program is $4.8 million, including all of the capital costs, which seems large, but it's actually $774,000 less than it was in the current year. So these numbers are big, but they're better than they were in the current budget year, and that's a good thing. So click next. So the last thing I want to cover is the pension policy. So Encina had a policy meeting. They got together, and they wanted to figure out how they can address their liability, their unfunded accrued liability. Both of our representatives were in attendance at the meeting. And what the results of the meeting is EWA wants to pay off their roughly $14 million unfunded accrued liability over 3 years. So they want to get 100% funded over a 3-year period. But they want to maintain flexibility. So they want to do that by committing to the first year payments, and then in the next year they'll wait and see how the market's doing to see if they want to continue with that approach. They think it'll mitigate some of their investment risks in the market, which is probably wise. There was some concern that they didn't want to become superfunded or overpay what they would have to pay. And they're going to, the requirement that they report back to the board on a regular basis. And they think that with all the assumptions they put in, they're going to save $10.7 million in interest payments on the CalPERS unfunded accrued liability. James, you go ahead, click one more. So this is, again, how the breakdown will be. If the board approves, if this board and the other 5 member agencies approves it and the EWA budget is approved, and they do a 3-year pay down on PERS for Vallecitos, if you click it once, our costs will go up by $788,000 in each of those 3 years to address our portion of that unfunded accrued liability. So again, saving $10.7 million overall is great. Our cost savings would be about $1.7 million, so by paying it off early. Our costs are $2.4 million of the total budget for PERS, and we'd save about $1.7 million on our funding. So if you can click on that. So if you roll all that together, and this is a very abbreviated version of the EWA budget, if you look at the capital, Vallecitos' share of capital costs, Vallecitos' share of the accelerated PERS, and the operating costs, our share of the EWA FY 2020 budget will be $8.362 million in FY 2020. And all those costs have been incorporated into Vallecitos' proposed budget that the board will be seeing in the month of June. James, you want to click? So the recommendation tonight is to adopt the resolution approving the Encina Wastewater Authority's 2020 budget for both the operating, the capital, and the CalPERS pension funding policy. And then if the board does that, we will forward that resolution to Encina so that they can take their final action. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for staff? Seeing none?
Not a question, just kudos to our representatives there at the board, and thanks for the presentation, Glenn. We look at year-over-year numbers frequently, and very rarely do we see negative signs in front of those numbers, so we'll take it. So.
All right.
Okay, look for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second,
I'll second.
We need a resolution.
Resolution,
resolution.
button pusher.
This is, yes, it is. This is about, please begin.
Yes. We're not lit up yet. There we go.
All votes are in.
100%.
Thank you.
Approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, board. And I just want to mention that Jim is the president of that board this year,
Yes.
and he's the one that made all those minus numbers come out that way.
I wished we jammed it down and made them suffer.
But I've got to give kudos to our GM and our finance people for working with them. Wes's name was brought up a few times in the committee, so they all knew who Wes was, because he's the one checking their numbers. But a great presentation, Glenn. I mean, that was very concise, very quick. Thank you very much. Great presentation. All right, number 2, 2.2, update water and wastewater capital facility fees. I believe that's why our 2 young ladies are in the audience. Are there people on that?
Not for that item. So James will actually be handling this item, and I just want to, before James jumps in, this is just an update. We're not asking for the board to take any action on the capital facility fees tonight. That'll be happening in June as well. So this is just to bring the board up to speed on the activities to date.
Thank you, President Martin, members of the board. This item begins on page 111 of your board packet, and this is just an update for the board of what we've done on the capital facility fees to date. So really quick, just kind of a brief history. As you recall, on May 1st at the board meeting, the board, let me get the terminology, approved the 2018 master plan and certified the programmatic EIR. The master plan itself is a foundation document that basically talks about and lays out both the capital projects and the timing and the estimated cost of those capital projects. From there, that's the foundation of what the capacity fees are based on. So with that, knowing that we were going down that road, we started working on the capital facility fees several months ago. We actually brought this fees forward to committee as early as February 25th to talk about the initial draft. Along doing some of the work in-house, staff went ahead and hired Keys Group. Karen Keys is an expert in the capacity field. She's done capacity fees for majority of the agencies in Southern California, and she's currently doing the fees for us and also the City of Austin Metro fees. With that, unfortunately, Karen Keys was actually supposed to be here tonight, but she has a fairly serious medical condition, and she's actually hanging it up. She's no longer working. She's committed to finishing our job. She's also committed to finishing the City of Austin, Texas's fees structure, which is a much larger job, but she's been prohibited from traveling. So she won't be here, or else she would be doing this presentation tonight. So unfortunately, you guys are stuck with me. So, but with that, I have almost all of her notes, and hopefully I could kind of go through this. So the capital facility fees, we're still using the incremental method. And what that means is growth pays for growth. There's no mixing of user rates to pay for growth-related jobs. And within the capital projects outlined within the master plan, any replacement has been carved out. So in other words, if we're upsizing a pipe and doubling the size, appropriately we've carved out that cost into growth and separated out the portion that's replacement. So this way we're keeping the two funds and the two jobs completely separate. So the fee is very simple. It's incremental method is what it's called, which essentially means growth pays for growth. Users or existing ratepayers pays for replacement. With that, staff brought the initial fee calculations to the Finance Committee on February 25th. We went over the assumptions, the model, and the basis of the fee. Essentially, the board actually, for the first time today, actually has a draft copy of the Capital Facilities Fee report. There's a lot of appendices that make the report thick that I didn't attach with it, but it will be available for anybody who wants to see it, including if any board members want to see that. The base document goes all the way back to 2011. Our capital projects that are outlined in the master plan are essentially the same. Both the timing of the projects and the cost of the projects have been updated. The model and the inputs in the model are essentially the same, but obviously our current financial positions in our capacity funds, as well as representing the proper interest rates that we're seeing today, those were updated in the capacity fee model and calculations. Initial setup after the 25th, we went back, we had some comments. We worked with the BIA, we had 2 meetings with the BIA, we had another meeting with some of the local development and consultants and other stakeholders, answered questions, and tried to go through what some of the questions that we received, especially on the interest rate and the different assumptions. We went back working with Wes and the financial team to go back to our financial advisors, as well as we got comments from Karen Keys. They're both consistent. They said our initial interest rate assumptions were a little high. So we updated started working on the study, updated our model to put in the proper assumptions, and we came back to the Finance Committee on, what was that, April 25th, with the recommendations. And what I'm about to show you today, if you could, Diane, if you could put it up on the board, is kind of the presentation that we gave to the Finance Committee on April 25th, which shows our initial presentation of what we, as far as our assumptions on what the capacity fees are from the original February meeting, and then the 3 options, which is the original option A, what we call option B, or the staff recommended option, which is based on input from both the Keys group and our financial advisors, as well as a third option, which I think Wes considers the bottom below the floor option. So with that, let's kind of talk about the project before. And you've seen this before. This is basically what the master plan laid out for water and sewer. The numbers are different because this is only the expansion portion. So if you look at the master plan, or if you remember the master plan presentation from board, the numbers are higher. And the reason they're higher in the master plan is because it included replacement and expansion of the components. What we did is we carved that out. So this is expansion only. You can see the water portion and the sewer portion laid out. So what this shows is option A. So option A is the big difference between options is interest rates and then how it affects it. And I'll kind of go over the columns and rows here really quick. But short term, which is basically the first debt issuance that we would see in option A, we assume 6%. Long term, which is any other debt issuance after the first, they come in roughly 5-year increments, we assumed 8%. So with that, we want to make sure that we are looking at these apples to apples. The first, obviously, water's in blue, sewer's in green, and then we have kind of this tan or orange color as the total. And our current fee right now, as you can see up at the top line here. So what is the difference between our existing model? So these first columns are basically, if we didn't have a new cap fee and we just adjusted everything to represent what we see today, what would our fee look like? And basically, we would see from changing the interest rates, we're increasing the fee, $652 for water and almost about $1,700 for sewer. The capital funding shortfall, and Wes could help me out if I stumble on this a little bit, but essentially during the recessionary times, we had some projects underway that we're building. We had debt service payments for all the growth-related projects. 40 million gallon tank to Twin Oaks Reservoir is a perfect example. And there wasn't enough funding within the capital facilities fund to cover it all. So there's a shortfall in that fund. The shortfall existed back in the current fee. So this current fee has shortfall in both water and sewer. This is the delta. This is just, these numbers are just the delta. So this is the increase in the fee if we were to just basically say, okay, let's change nothing, not even, ignore the fact that the new master plan has changed stuff and just revamp the fee based on the old master plan. This would be the additional $1,000 in water and $812 in sewer. Obviously, if you think about the big debt service in water, it's the 40 million gallon tank. The sewer debt service is Encina Phase 5 expansion and Millard treatment plant extension. Sewer treatment, so here's something that is current and new. Our new master plan now has sewer treatment. Before we had, the board may remember something called a wastewater density impact fee. It wasn't part of the master plan, so we didn't have a adopted source document that showed we needed treatment. The new master plan, which was recently approved, now does. It says we need sewer treatment. So that's an equivalent of about $3,800 on the side based on the treatment costs of expansion or purchasing treatment at Encina in the future. And then EWA capital. We didn't have that. EWA didn't have any additional capital back in after the 2008 master plan that is expansion related. EWA has 2 projects on the books, and our portion of those projects equate up to about $925. Those 2 projects are the new waste gas flare, thank you, and the basically new heat dryer. Those are, I forgot what the project totals are, in the 40-something million dollars. Obviously, we don't pay for the whole thing. We pay our appropriate 24%, and then it's just the expansion portion of that. So if you made everything apples to apples for fee comparison, this would be what our fees are. Our proposed fees based on these above interest rates are shown here. So you're looking at going from an apples to apples comparison of $26,000 to $27,000 and change roughly. Doesn't sound too bad, but however, the real change that a developer will see is from $17,000 to $27,000. So if you look at the next line, this is basically draft versus adjusted, which means the apples to apples comparison. Our water fee actually goes down. Now, why does it go down? It goes down because we spread out the water projects. If I go back, let's see if I do this, you can see we have a lot of water projects in here, but they're not in the fee study. And this is not a tremendous amount of water jobs. Well, most of our storage projects, as you may recall from Senior Engineer Robert Scholl's presentation, are way out in the future. Okay, and we're going to have a lot more time to plan for those. And we have a lot more opportunity to plan for those as we see development actually occur. So the water projects is actually, there's less water projects. The sewer projects actually went up in the apples to apples comparison, and that's because the sewer projects essentially did not change from the 2008 master plan to the 2018 master plan. The difference is the timing and the cost. We're representing the new numbers. In 2008, it was cheaper to build than in 2018. It's actually what it comes down to. But the projects are the same. So these projects and the water projects that stay the same, but there's less of them. These projects and the sewer projects stay the same, and they're the same amount, and they're more expensive. So when you look at that and do the apples to apples comparison, you can see that water actually goes down because of it, sewer goes up, so you got about a 3.6% increase. Now, that's the apples to apples comparison. When a developer walks in the door, he knows that he was paying for water and sewer for an EDU about $17,700, and now they're looking at, where is it here? I just lost it.
You just went up.
Went back. Go back one.
Sorry, that's why I lost it. Okay, now you're looking at a $25,000 option.
No, go back one slide.
Oh, wow. Too much clicking, sorry about that. Okay, so about a $27,000 option, $27,600. So everything stays the same. All the assumptions, everything stays the same. All we did was change the interest rate based on recommendations from the Keys Group and also our financial advisors. So the second option B is what we call the staff recommended option. Is basically short-term interest rate is going to 5%, the long-term is going to 6.5%. As you may recall, this was 6% and 8% in the previous option. And what that does is it takes a significant amount of that interest rate off and brings that fee down to $24,600. So let me go back up one. So instead of a almost $10,000 increase, it brings it down to about $7,800 increase. So that interest rate is, the model is sensitive to that interest rate, and it makes a fairly large difference. Everything else, all the other assumptions, nothing changed in them. There are all kind of adopted numbers, board adopted numbers from whether it's the master plan or budgets or EWA adopted numbers. And then the last option, which we call the floor option basically, is going to 4.5% for short term and 6% for long. And you see it actually does a reduction based on the current fee, based on the interest and the timing of when those projects come in. But the overall fee still goes up, and you got about a $7,000 interest, $7,000 increase in the total fee, with the total fee between water and sewer going to about $23,800 and change. The next couple slides are just here for to give everybody kind of how we broke it out. These are projects right out of the master plan, and you can see expansion funding per contribution. Some of them are 100%, some of them are 33%. So we went through and separated out. We have to ensure that we keep true and consistent to the method. Growth pays for growth. Our ratepayers do not pay for growth-related expenditures. And one's water, the other one's sewer, obviously a lot more sewer projects. And within it, and let me back up here, is also the phasing. So you have all these large projects that are in phase 5 for the water CIP. They are not included in the fee study. In the sewer side, we only included 2 projects in the fee study that are phase 5, which is the ultimate phase past 2035, 2036 and above. And those 2 projects are treatment expansion and the land outfall. The reason we included those are they are multi-phase projects. It's going to take us, if we were to build, more than 10 years. We're going to start spending money in phase 3, phase 4, which is 2025, 2030, towards those projects to get them built in time for when we need them. We've talked about this with the BIA at length. They are on board with that concept for those 2 projects. They are happy about all other phase 5 projects being excluded from the fee. Staff feels that is a good position because there's a long, as you board may recall from the master plan presentation, phase 1 through 4 are 5-year increments. Phase 5 is in the script. It goes on for a long time. So we have a lot of time to adjust. If an area doesn't develop the way the city is planning or the county plans it to develop, we don't have to build those facilities. So let's see, with that, here's some comparison, and one of the things the Finance Committee requested is how would these new fees compare? As you can see on the water side, is kind of the better news here, is we're fairly low, and this is not everybody. We tried to pick other agencies that had some growth in it, and we tried to pick more, we picked our member agencies at EWA, but we also tried to pick more agencies that are more growth related. Cities have other funding sources, including tax revenues and other basically facility fees, and so their fees don't really compare well. You can see some of the other water agencies, and it all depends on how they decide to separate it out. But you can see we still stay on the low end on the water, and most of this is attributed to the way we spread the CIP. We have a lot of water projects to build, we just don't have to build them for a long time. Sewer, on the other hand, we end up jumping to the top of the list, the platinum standard of the list here. So, and we become the most expensive. So that's kind of the bad news there. When we combine it, we are not the most expensive on a combined fee. Every agency doesn't serve water and sewer, so it doesn't relate straight across the board. But you can kind of see from our kind of local North County agencies where we're at. The next couple of slides are basically the same thing we showed, just in a bar graph format, because you get a kind of a flavor for where we are percentage-wise. Water, you can see sewer. So we are high, but we're right there. And then existing, current to proposed. So again, that's sewer, existing, proposed, water, existing, proposed. With that, again, as the general manager indicated, this is not an action item for board. We're planning on bringing this forward. We're planning also to start sharing the draft report. We need to still finalize the report. And then basically based on comments and any other inputs, finalize both the report and the model, and hopefully bring it back to the board in probably mid to late June for adoption of the fees. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Questions? Mr. Hernandez?
Sorry. It seems to me that sometime in the past, we discussed being able to pay your fees ahead of time or waiting until you actually had your final inspection. Is that still the case?
Yeah, so currently with the board policy, developer does not have to pay the fees until right at occupancy. When we sign the occupancy slips, they have to pay the fees prior to that. So everything can be done, and it really extended time. As per the BIA's request, the board adopted the policy that basically adopted that type of procedure. Any developer still has the ability to pay the fees up front. However, they have to be a certain level along with their project before they pay the fees. The fees are non-refundable when they pay. If they don't have all their entitlements, if they're not in the process, if they're not annexed into the district, we really can't accept fees on basically a hypothetical.
I might add to that, I believe we were the first district to do that for the BIA. They used us and all their other presentations to say, look, Vallecitos did it, so that's the good news. Director Elefar?
Yeah, you mentioned this, using the incremental method where growth pays for growth. This implies to me that there are some other methods, and I'd like to know what those are and what the justification is for
Sure.
those.
So there's two terms for it, but basically it's a hybrid method where you take some of the cost factors for expansion of an infrastructure, and you roll it into user rates. So every month when they pay their bill, a portion of the water bill or a portion of the sewer bill is proportioned out for growth-related projects. So what the Keys Group basically told me is once you start hitting that, you're getting close to build out, and you still have projects to build, then within the laws, the agency could start looking at that method to build capital, because at that point, you don't have a lot of EDUs coming in to pay for those projects. So if you stick with the incremental method, you might have a $40, $50, $60, $80,000 per EDU fee. I mean, the sky's the limit, so to speak. If you only have 400 homes to build before you're built out, and you have a large sewer line to put in, it's going to be divided by 400. It's a very simple method. It's basically cost of the capital divided by EDUs, and it's a total cost including financing and everything else. So, and it's separated a different way. It's some people call it the buy-in method is the other way, but it's basically a hybrid method. So full buy-in is if you have no growth, but yet you know you have to upgrade your system for regulatory reasons. For example, you have 4-inch, 6-inch water lines. They don't meet fire flow, so you have to make them 8-inch or 10-inch to meet the new fire flow regulations. Then it makes sense in the buy-in method that everybody pays for that. Everybody's buying in.
Okay, thanks. One more question. If we were to approve these fees sometime in June, when would they take effect?
There's a 60-day period. So the fees have to be noticed for, they can't take effect for 60 days to give people opportunity to get their entitlements or come and pay in front. I know that, I don't know the statute, but I believe 1600.
So that's the soonest the fee can go into place, but if the board wanted to defer the fees for some reason, you could do that, but there'd be lost revenue associated with that delay.
Thank you.
Well, and I have a question. Interesting, we're talking about lost revenue. If we didn't do this fee thing for another 5 years, it means the fees would go up double what they are now. You won't be able to build anything. Is that, I mean, that's eventually what you get to. At some point in time, you've got to pay for your utilities.
Yes, and that's an excellent point. I didn't really think of it that way, but if you think of it, you're increasing your capital facility shortfall, or you have to go out for additional debt to cover the difference between what you should be collecting compared to what you are collecting. So if you go out for additional debt, any debt that you receive, whether it's at 6%, 8%, 7%, it's going to be much more expensive than if you had cash on hand and you could pay-go method or cash fund projects. So right now the assumption is we're going to go out for debt on the projects, and that's a fair assumption because as we get more and more replacement projects, it is fair to say that we will be in a position that will need debt issuance. Because, for example, when you build a 40 million gallon tank, we're still waiting for everybody to come in to use that 40 million gallon tank, but you can't build 100,000 gallons at a time, or you can't build part of a treatment plant or part of a pipe. So you have to build it as soon as it's required, as soon as that first person needs it, that facility needs to be there. Or you're gonna be ripping up the street again and making the next size and going back in every 10 years.
Director Sinala?
Yeah, a couple things, James, and thank you for the presentation. So the last master plan that we're operating under was 2008, correct?
Correct.
And then the numbers were implemented in 2011. So that's part of the problem, right? I mean, that's a significant amount of time that has passed since we've adopted a new master plan, right? In 9 years, is that normal?
Yeah, but you have to remember the 2008 master plan was actually adopted in 2011, or end of 2010.
Mm-hmm.
So we adopted the master plan in 2011, the cap fees followed suit right after.
So, but it's still been 8.5, 9 years?
Yes.
And typically this would be done every 5 years, right?
If there's significant land use changes, yes. Between 2008 and the new 2018 master plan, both the counties and cities adopted new general plans. So yes, it was significant, and that made a huge difference.
Yeah. So as it pertains to the interest rates, yeah, I think we should take, assuming that this board's going to be a little bit more proactive in looking at our master plan and adopting it, we'll have opportunities to adjust those interest rates in the future if need be. So I think we probably want to take the side of, caution on the side of error as far as keeping them a little bit lower to begin with. But the other thing I wanted to talk about, though, is as policymakers, we look at kind of the big jumps, and you pointed out the wastewater side of things, and it's significant. It's $8,500, $9,000, and it's going to put us at the highest. I know you joked that we like to refer to ourselves as the platinum level when it comes to customer service, but not when it comes to fees. And it doesn't matter if they're fees that we charge our residential customers or anybody else that does business with the district, right? Mm-hmm. And we're also mindful as policymakers that a lot of these fees, that in particular that we charge to developers, simply get passed to the folks who buy the homes that they build. And as policymakers, we also recognize that there's a housing affordability issue throughout our region and California. And so we got to be mindful of kind of the bigger picture of everything. So I'm a little bit concerned with the significant increase on the wastewater side. Not so much on the water side. I think that seems pretty reasonable. Can we, between now and June, either at the finance committee level or the entire board, do a real deep dive as to how staff came up with those wastewater figures and the projects that are involved and the timelines for those projects?
Yeah, they're actually all adopted within the master plan themselves. So it's the same exact presentation that Robert Scholl from engineering gave you with the timelines of the SANDAG, timelines of what the city said it's going to build, and what we're seeing. So it basically be the master plan presentation. We'd be happy to go over the master plan with you again. They're straight out of the adopted master plan. There's no deviation because it's an adopted document. So if we were to variance from the adopted master plan, then our fees would be up for challenge and very challengeable. It'd be hard to defend because right now everything that we're using is adopted budget from EWA, adopted master plan, adopted budget from us, adopted numbers from our financial statements. And I would caution to say to go away from that and deviate from that would leave the board and the district, not the board, but the district vulnerable.
Yeah, it reminds me of our budget process that we're going through right now, and it being relatively new to government, if you will, I've always been interested and kind of fascinated how we do things. So we adopt a budget, and then based off that budget, we build our rates. And it seems to me that we should build our rates and then budget to what the revenue that we have. And it sounds like this is similar. That we adopted a master plan, and now I don't remember it wasn't pointed out to us that there was going to be a $9,000 increase when we were looking at the master plan. And maybe I missed a meeting, but I don't recall that. I don't know if any of the other board members recall that, but it's just interesting, and it's unfortunate because I think that's quite honestly, I think that's an unreasonable demand to put on anybody. It could be a customer, a developer, or anyone else to have that sort of significant increase. But I also, back to what I started with, I also recognize that it's been a long period of time since we've gone through this master plan process. So I get it. I just find it unfortunate. And I think that it will have a negative impact on the greater community as well, the home buyers, ultimately.
I do. I have sympathy for the development community with the fees for sure. And the good news is we aren't the highest fee even with these increases that the developers have to pay. There are other agencies and other fees that are have significant fees. But with that, that's why I kind of put together this comparison. So in other words, if we kept our existing master plan and all we did was update the new interest rates and our existing cash positions, this is what the fee would be. Just based on updating that, it's not even with the master plan. So the difference that the new master plan made on the fees is actually $1,400. It's still significant, but it's almost $1,500. It's not the full difference, almost $9,000. And that's because, we have that treatment component. We have the EWA component that wasn't there. We have the different interest rate, and then we have also the delta in the amount of funds that were outputted compared to the amount of funds that were inputted for the capacity fund shortfall. And that's because of that long period of time, as you pointed out.
If I can just clarify one point, the current fee structure was put in place in 2011, but it did have an escalator. So fees were adopted in 2011, but every year they got adjusted upwards. We didn't run a new model or do a new master plan, but they were incremental.
I recall when I first got on the board in 2014, the fees were around 14,000-ish. Now they're in the 17. So
yeah.
Well, I think, and I want to thank staff, being on the budget committee, you did a great job of laying all this out. I think from a development standpoint, they have to pay their own way. And if they're going to build something in the next year, they want you to kick the can down for 2 years. But sooner or later, that fee's got to be paid. Those are real costs that we're going to have. And eventually, if you don't start collecting it, you're going to make building in San Marcos impossible. Because it would go up to $50,000 a house, or 60 or 70. I mean, I'm just saying I understand the plight, but I understand looking back at your board too that you really need to compare us not with any other city, because cities have fees, PFF fees. The city of San Marcos is known widely for their PFF fees, which also are much higher than some of the other cities. But they collect differently, so that's a difference to us. So, yeah, I see the numbers, and you said it's a draft, so we'll be talking about it in a future meeting. But I want to thanks for walking me through this better than I was walked through ever before. 11, 12, 13. Didn't completely understand it, and you've enlightened me. So thank you very much. Anyone else? Thanks. Director.
Just one last question. The interest rates, both the assumptions for the interest rates, short-term and long-term, are they based on the bond market?
Yeah, so we went ahead, when the BIA asked us, can you get some examples, we checked to see what the muni bonds were that Padre Dam recently got, and the muni bond was at 4.5%. I worked with Wes, and Wes contacted our financial advisors and look at, what it's called COPS, but what does COPS stand for?
Certificates of participation.
So we usually get certificates of participation. Thank you. And they're actually trending higher than the muni bond at 5%. And I don't know if it's because we may not be eligible for muni bonds. So from a staff level, we thought the best we could do is about 5%. And the fact that Padre Dam, when I contacted them, they start that process months and months and months before it gets locked in. So the fact that they got 4.5% recently doesn't mean that even in a muni bond scenario, we would be able to get that today. So we actually went out and did some research. As far as future, you're just looking at what the advisors are saying, that there's pressures on interest rates to go up in the future. But working with the BIA, and I'm glad board members the directors now expressed this, there's opportunity if the interest rates and the market changes to open this thing back up at board discretion to adjust those interest rates and make no other assumptions. And that's a possibility. And we expressed that to the BIA, saying that could be a possibility And that would obviously have a factor. But then again, if interest rates go up significantly, it'd be the same thing.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Great report, thank you very much. Okay, now we're gonna move to item 2.3, the correct item for the investment policy.
Yeah, so I think Wes will introduce this item, and then he'll introduce some special guests we have today.
Thank you, Wes. And Charlie.
Okay, let's see. Good evening, President Martin, members of the board. Tonight I'll be presenting on the 2019 investment policy. It should be a short presentation, and I'm going to be assisted, and I didn't bring Jenny's card, but I believe her last name is Linkowitz.
Yes.
Okay, and Jenny, actually, it's going to be just a minute. You don't have to get up just yet. I got to be close to my mic so you can hear me. Let me know if you can't hear me. I'll lean in more. So first, I'm going to give a little background. Then I'll go over our advisor's review. I actually have Mia Corral Brown here with us as well. They're both from Chandler Asset Management, our investment advisors. Then we're going to talk about Chandler's policy recommendations. We'll go over, actually Chandler will present their policy recommendations and their compliance review, and then we'll talk about staff's recommendation. So first, the district submits the policy to the board for approval on an annual basis, and this is done because it's recommended by the government code, its GFOA best practices, as well as the Treasurers Association's best practices. And the last time the policy was brought to the board was March 7, 2018, so we're due for an update. And as you know, Chandler was brought on board, contracted by the district in April of 2018. And one of the services they provide is to review our investment policy and give us recommendations on an annual basis in order to do this presentation we're showing you today. And April 29, 2019, Chandler presented to the Finance Committee their policy changes as well as an economic update. And there were no changes to the policy recommended by the Finance Committee. No additional changes, I should say. They saw Chandler's changes. And in keeping with my tradition that I created last year, I'm going to quote from Chandler's recommendation. And they said, after comparing the investment policy to California Government State Code and our best practices, we have provided a summary of the material recommendations below. And with that, I'll let Jenny go through their recommendations and their policy review for you.
Hi, Jen.
Hello, thank you so much. Good evening, honorable directors and staff. Thank you for inviting Chandler here this evening to present our material investment policy recommendations. I believe you have this information in your board packets, and we also have a slide that goes over those changes as well. So the first change that we want to recommend, and I just want to mention that the district's policy is very well written, and it follows state code. There's just a few changes that we wanted to recommend that reflect some recent changes to California code and also some updates to Chandler's best practices as well. So the first change that we wanted to recommend, and these are all included in the Word document as well. They've already been incorporated, and this has been reviewed by the Finance Committee as well. So the first couple of changes that we wanted to suggest are clarifications more than anything else to the investment policy. The first one is a time of purchase language addition that specifies that credit rating minimums in the policy apply at the time of purchase. And what that means is that if something is rated single A and it were to get downgraded, we would work with staff to determine whether it's best to sell it or to hold it based on market conditions, and we wouldn't want to be forced to sell it. So this is an assumption that's already made, I think, with code and with the policy, but this just clarifies that for all parties. The second change we wanted to recommend was made to California Government Code back in 2017, and it's more of a housekeeping item. It just suggests that when we're purchasing securities, they must be in the A category or better. So the word category was added, meaning that if the rating has a modifier, such as a minus or a plus, that is not included. It's anything that's rated A minus or higher could be purchased. So this would bring your policy consistent with that change that was made to code. Now, the third change is the most material, I think, in terms of how we are able to invest the portfolio. And the policy currently has a limit of 10% for each federal government agency. And so that would be, for example, Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And 10% is a fairly conservative amount. These are very safe securities. And typically we see a limitation a little bit higher. So what we wanted to suggest is that we increase that limitation from 10% to 25% so that the district can take advantage of additional amounts of these very conservative securities. The fourth change that we wanted to recommend is something that would bring the policy in line with California Government Code in terms of commercial paper ratings. And it just suggests that commercial paper ratings typically are short-term ratings. And rather than requiring a long-term rating of single A or better, we wanted to say it would be single A or better if the issuer has long-term ratings. And so that's directly quoted from California Government Code. So we were going to suggest that as well. And the fifth change that we wanted to suggest was a clarification to a gray area, actually, in California Government Code that was just adopted and became effective the first of this year. And it applies to asset-backed securities, mortgage-backed securities, and pass-through securities. And in the past, these have always had a minimum rating requirement of AA category or higher. And then there was an issuer rating requirement of single A or higher. And in point of fact, a lot of these securities are issued out of trusts that don't actually have necessarily ratings. So different investment managers interpret that different ways. Chandler has a pretty conservative interpretation, but we wanted to recommend that the district adopt a policy that's consistent with the change to California Government Code that clears up this gray area. So any bonds that would be purchasing in this category would still be rated AA or higher. Okay, the next change we wanted to recommend is in regards to some language regarding money market mutual funds. And California Code actually allows those to be purchased up to 20%. And that's both for at the issuer level and as an asset class. And so we wanted to recommend an increase from 10% to 20% to be consistent with California Code. And then the last few recommendations in the risk management and diversification section, one is adding language limiting exposure to any individual issuer, and we wanted to recommend adding language saying except for where otherwise specified in the policy. And that's just, it's a minor change, but I think it just helps reduce the risk of having conflicting language within the policy. And then another change we wanted to recommend to that section is actually a pretty important change. There's a limitation in the policy currently that limits our purchases to 20% for callable securities. And there actually are a number of bonds in the market now, particularly issued by banks, that have a call feature 1 month prior to maturity. So we wanted to recommend that the limitation on callables be increased to 30%. And the reason is because we want to be able to buy some of these callables that have very short call provisions so that isn't a violation of the policy in any way. And then we also had, in addition to the glossary, just defining what a make-whole call is for corporate bonds. So I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have on these topics.
Questions from the board? I have one for Wes. Do you agree with all these?
I have reviewed the recommendations and I do agree with them.
Thank you. Okay, we need a motion.
Well, so the next couple slides are just the compliance review that we get on a monthly basis. Just shows that our policy complies with all of these categories. It's kind of small, but that's done monthly, quarterly, and this is part of the annual. And then finally, staff's recommendation is that we adopt the investment policy for 2019.
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Resolution.
Resolution.
Thank you. And this is, okay, please start.
Thank you.
Okay, all votes are in. Thank you.
Yeah, I really like the ta-da moment, by the way.
That's exciting.
That's exciting. Yeah, you just wait bated breath. Thank you very much for your presentation. Okay, 2.4, later date. 2.5, discussion of the Colorado River Water Supply Alternative Conveyance Facility. As we recall, we had a presentation from the temporary or the interim CEO.
Yeah, so back on May 1st, Sandy Curl, who's the acting general manager for the County Water Authority, came in and told the board about the Water Authority's plans to study an alternative conveyance facility from the Colorado River to connect to the Water Authority's distribution system. At the conclusion of that meeting, there was discussion amongst the board, and they asked that this be agendized so that the board can discuss that. So I don't have any specific new information to present. It's just an opportunity for the board to have any conversations they want. We do have a copy of Sandy's presentation, if that would be helpful for the board, if you want to refer to it.
I have a question as to when, maybe Director Evans knows, when is this going to be coming up for a vote? Is it going to be part of, or can it be bifurcated from the vote on the
what?
on the budget? I guess that's where they're looking to put money into the budget.
No, I think it's coming up for $3.9 million as a budget inclusion, and I believe it comes up June or July.
It'll be in June.
It is June.
And I did discuss that very issue with Ms. Curl, and I asked her if she'd be separating it out as two separate items. She said, no, it'll be included as part of the budget. It won't be a separate policy discussion.
Okay. Do we have any discussion?
And do we vote to approve their budget like we do with Encina?
We do.
We do.
It's not the same formality that EWA does. It doesn't get sent back here for an action. Your delegate will vote at the budget adoption meeting at Encina.
Our delegate will vote her conscience. She doesn't need to vote the way we do, but we can ask for direction, and then
I'm
she may
waiting.
put to mind what she wants to do with it.
Absolutely, but I want to hear what you all think.
Director Sinello.
And I apologize, but I missed the meeting when they presented this, but my understanding is this is going to be, they're estimating about $3 billion for this aqueduct. And did they talk about how this kind of fits in with pure water and desalination? If pure water gets to the point where, and I think it will someday eventually, get to the point where it becomes a significant source of water for the county, will they need a parallel aqueduct out to Colorado? It just doesn't seem like it makes a whole lot of sense.
So the basic premise is that the Water Authority has rights to Colorado River water. So they have a quantification settlement agreement through the IID, Imperial Irrigation District, that gave them access to a certain amount of water. They also have canal lining water. So they have about 280,000 acre feet on an annual basis of water that they need to get from the Colorado River to San Diego County. The only way to do that right now is through the Colorado River Aqueduct that's owned and operated by Metropolitan. So your question was a bit different. Do they even need that? Their assumption is that their local supplies of Colorado River water is going to be their base loading. That's what they're going to rely most on. If projects like Pure Water come on, or the Padre Dam's advanced water purification, and as those come on, what the Water Authority sees is they'll need to buy less water from Metropolitan, but they'll still need to get their supplies over here. So, and thank you, Diane. So Diane brought this up, and that's what they tried to show, is that on the far left, the regional conveyance facility is estimated to cost about $3 billion. But just to transport the 280,000 acre feet of water that they have rights to at the current and projected rates that Metropolitan will charge for transportation, that'll be about $6 billion over the course of the rights that they have to the Colorado River water supplies. Ms. Curl also showed what would happen if you look to the far right, the $10 billion, if WaterFix is built and Metropolitan puts their share of WaterFix costs on the transportation costs, then the transportation costs will go way up for all water that's transported through the metropolitan system, in which the San Diego County Water Authority is disproportionately hit. So it would go from a $6 billion cost up to a $10 billion cost. So that's what Sandy shared to show that, yes, $3 billion is a lot of money, but we're looking at possibly upwards of $10 billion if we don't build our own aqueduct.
If I could add to that, we have, as the water authority, we have 110 years of the guaranteed water from my ID. We have, if you go back a slide, I think it was, we've already got a commitment for the, or whatever, you had one with the 45 years. We have the conveyance available. So the delivery agreement with MWD goes for 45 years. We still have a 75 years with the transfer water. So there is a gap there where we'd have to be renegotiating it. So that's part of what they're thinking. They're also looking at it that you're right about the pure water may make a difference and some of the other recycle projects going on. And I don't know if you're here or not, Mike, but part of what they're pushing is that we have this water, we're entitled to the water, and if we can get it here, we can also, they're doing, double things. They're trying to get the right to store it in Lake Mead. They're trying to, if we're in control of the water, that's how they're looking at it, then we can sell it to other people if we don't need it. Because right now, we're committed to it for the terms. So it's a lot of money, and it has been looked at for other times, and it was always considered economically infeasible more than anything else. There's a lot of environmental concern, and they're stating that they're going to be looking at the environmental issues and the feasibility of it. But where they're coming from is reading the agenda is that we're only asking for $4 million, just under, to do another study to see if we can do it. And the good things are, if we don't need the water, we can sell it, we can use it, we can give it to Arizona, you sell it to someone else. Is that the chart? Yes, and even some of this, they've talked about different areas within San Diego County that could benefit from more water that could reach them in different ways. So it's not exactly the same sales pitch that it was the first time. But it does have, I am sure, some threat to MWD to it. It's like, well, we'll just leave you. But realistically, we are, and the water is there for us. And that's what they're looking at. And I do think that MWD has a strong feeling they wouldn't mind putting the water fix on transportation and San Diego County paying for it.
Director Illithart.
Yeah, going back to the cost slide, are these all present value, all these numbers?
I think they were made, I can't say for sure.
It's hard to tell.
It's hard to tell.
I don't know if
And
we're
what-
really looking at apples to apples
Right.
either on this. Some of these may be through the course of the lifetime of the various things, but
Yeah.
I'd like to know if these are all brought back to present value or not.
Okay.
So that we can make a valid comparison. And also, one of the slides said there would have to be an agreement with IID for the water coming through the All-American Canal to the beginning of the conveyance project.
Go to the beginning. This one?
Maybe the next one. Yeah, okay, so sufficient capacity exists in the All-American Canal, but a transportation agreement. So that's an additional cost, I assume. That's probably a transportation charge from IID.
It could be, and Diane, if you go to the cost chart, I don't know if the.
I got control.
Oh, you got it, I'm sorry, James. So I don't know what the $7 billion one.
Yeah, there just isn't a whole lot of detail in these initial slides. And the other things, I think $3.9 million is a lot of money for a study. I don't know how you spend that much on a study level.
Yeah, so if I could maybe add a little to that, when this was first presented to the general managers, they received a lot of pushback. It's you've already studied this, what's changed, why so much, what are you really looking at? And I think they've modified it in response to that. And we felt as general managers that they were looking too detailed. They were starting to do alignment studies and geotechnical borings, and we said, you should really be looking at the big picture stuff like CEQA and cost feasibility first, instead of doing that afterwards. So they broke it into two phases, and they're trying to front end load in phase one those bigger picture things, a CEQA deeper look and the cost component. And there's no other, I haven't seen the final report, but what we were told they were gonna do is structure it so that there'd be a reporting back mechanism, that when phase one was completed, they'd have to go back to the board to see if they wanted to go to phase two. The cost of 3.9 includes both phases, but there wouldn't be, they couldn't just unilaterally, the GM couldn't just say, time to go to phase two, they'd have to check back in with the board. I didn't understand whether it was gonna be about half the money, they didn't say how much is phase one and how much is phase two, but there would be a check-in and presumably an off-ramp. If phase one says, we can't get through CEQA, and these numbers didn't, present value, it wasn't apples to apples, and it doesn't make sense anymore, then it would stop there.
Jim, do you have a question?
In addition to San Diego and Padre Dam, Encina's looking at a 20 million gallon a day reclamation facility that we're ongoing with right now. They, just this morning, and I'll bring it up again, but we had information about the south parcel in moving forward with that. So I personally think we got water, and I didn't even mention the groundwater in San Marcos have. So that study should be coming up soon.
That's 72 gallons, I think.
I think, Jim, they're thinking that the authority is thinking that if we get this extra water, they'll send it straight to South Lake.
There you go.
Right.
I got
You know, you've been talking.
I've been talking,
Yes.
working the work.
I've got a couple of real serious, that $3 billion number, if we thought $1 billion was gonna be expensive for a desal plant to bring a pipe up 7 miles, I can't imagine how much money and how much they're gonna have to buy, how much property they're gonna have to buy, how many lawsuits there are gonna be. I think if they had to go ahead to do it today, it'd be 15 years before you'd see a drop. Problem you have is you have Ewa, you have Pure Water, you have Padre Dam, all getting into the recycle business, which is what everybody wants us to do. So it's really interesting, I'm taking their side on it. But the truth is, when they get into the recycling business, there's only one person they can sell it to, and that's the County Water Authority. They can't sell it to anybody else. So the water authority's gotta agree to buy this water. How are they gonna buy this water at the same time they're building a canal? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense at all. Because anything that's done, at least the Sea Pure Water and EWAS, has gotta come back uphill again. So it's gonna be piping, it's gonna be expensive, the water's gonna be expensive. It's gonna be probably as expensive as desal water. You know, it's gonna be expensive. Well, if they're getting all this water supposedly from the car, that's the cheapest water. To hear her, she brought it up 3 times when she was here. It's the cheapest water, the cheapest water. It's like, well, in my opinion, and I don't know anything about it really, but they'll never get an environmental impact report. The only reason that they're putting this in is financial. The only reason. There's no need. We get the water now. It's purely, and I don't think it's gonna pass CEQA, an EIR. I think you just save us $4 million down the drain to make the new sheriff in town look like the shiny bad sheriff in town. We're gonna show that. So I'm totally against it. That's my opinion.
Just to clarify, and thanks, Director Evans, for sharing information on this since you're a representative down there. So we have the rights to the water, but is it similar to our agreement that we have with DSAL that is the water authority required to buy the water that they have the rights for?
Yes. Yeah, it's a take or pay. You're paying for that water whether you take it or not through your agreement with IID.
Okay.
So, and that's what I wanted to clarify. This isn't about bringing in a new source of water. It's the same water. It's just how you're getting it here. And they're trying to make an economic argument that there's a cheaper way.
And the last thing I'm gonna say is, this $3 billion project's gonna end up being more like $9 billion. And then how long will it take to pay that back? I don't know that it'd be any cheaper than paying the wheeling costs. I mean, it just doesn't make sense that it would be.
And I think those would be reasonable requests in the phase one economic analysis to show us a better time value, to show when do the lines cross, when do you recoup your monies? Because you gotta pay this money up front. It's kind of like James's discussion with cap fees. You pay it up front, and you get it back in through other ways, through cost savings of what you're not paying to Metropolitan. But
I'm biased, but I don't trust them, so I wouldn't do it, but that's me. They've proven their partnership already to us, in my opinion. It's as bad as Met is to them, or perceived to be in their opinion. I don't know if Met's that bad anymore. I'm sure Met has an agreement that San Diego County Water Authority signed.
So what exactly is on the table here? Are we do we need to give Director Evans some direction, or?
No, she's gonna make up her own mind when she gets down there.
yeah, you
But
can't
we should
technically
give
direct your representative.
Right.
The representative votes their conscience, but listens to her fellow board members.
Okay.
I mean, I would appreciate each of your basic opinion.
I'll start.
Jim?
I don't think it's reasonable.
To
that we
spend 3.9 million
Right.
to explore, okay?
I would, however, let me qualify that. I would, however, agree to the phase one if they broke it in half. So that with the phase one study, then we would have this other information to then potentially go on to a phase two if it made real sense. But just to give the money in the budget presently and then come back, again, I'm with the president here, I'm not very trustworthy of them.
I'm almost dead certain there are, what did you call them? Off-ramps.
Off-ramps?
There's a lot of people concerned about that on the board.
Yeah.
So, and the real question right now is not whether we believe they're gonna do it or not, and that's gonna take 50 years, 1,000 years, or $500 billion. What's really in front of the board at the Water Authority is, are we willing to commit 3.9 to the budget to begin a fifth review? Now, obviously, this board prior boards, 4 different times, for whatever reasons, and long before the litigation that's going on now, agreed to this. So it's something that's been looked at a lot. It's really, and that's my question in front of me when I go there, is do I feel comfortable giving 3.9 million to give it a look? And I agree with you. We do have to have off-ramps, and we do have to have a way to say, no, this isn't it. As soon as we know that. One of my first questions with them was, well, how are you prioritizing what you're looking into? Because I was agreeing with Glenn on, why are you figuring out how many miles of tunnel you can dig with a new machine when we don't even know if you can or you own the property? So thank you.
Yeah,
Mike.
I guess you just sealed the deal for me, Director Evans, because you bring up a good point, and our general manager brought up some good points too, that it sounds like maybe they're not studying the right things. And perhaps instead of giving them the $4 million to start the study, why don't you hold that back as leverage to kind of hash out some more of the particulars as to what they're going to study and what they would do with the money if it was given to them. But as a board, I think once you give it to them, they're going to do what they do, and they're going to run with it. So I'd say at this time, if I was in your position, I would probably lean towards withholding that for now and have them come back.
For further detail. Okay.
My thought is that they're gonna present it, because that's what they want. They want the 4 million. And they're not gonna bifurcate, they're not gonna take it as a separate. And some of the board members may bring up, well, we'd like to have checks in place, and they'll say, oh yeah, we'll do that, oh yeah, we'll do that, oh yeah, they'll do that. So everybody's pacified and they all vote for it. But it's not in writing, and as we know, they love contracts.
They're very legal.
It needs to be there. If it's not there, I wouldn't vote for it. If it's there, and they're gonna do that, do it in 2 parts, I can understand spending some money, but they're not gonna let you do that. I would almost bet on that they're not gonna let you do that. They're gonna say, oh yeah, trust us, we'll do this, and we know we can't trust them.
Appreciate that. Okay.
Yeah, I think I'm with Director Sinella. If I were you, I'd like to see additional detail before committing to the study.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna suggest. I could work with Director Evans and maybe try to get better clarity on their proposed phasing, what's in phase 1. How will they document these off-ramps to President Martin's point, to make sure that we aren't just throwing the 9 million away, that there is a legitimate off-ramp and we're looking at the right things. And if they can get those assurances, is the board happy then? If they're looking at the right things and not committing to the full amount, if the phase one doesn't turn out the way we want, is that, would you feel comfortable with Director Evans supporting it and under those conditions?
I want to thank you. I really appreciate the input.
Okay, moving on. Nomination for Aqua Region 10 Board. Anyone want to be nominated to be on the Aqua 10 Board?
Seems like that comes up every meeting.
I am on the board right
Oh.
now. My term will end, I believe, at the end of the year. And at this moment, I'd be interested to move forward, but I wouldn't come to you and ask for it until we get into June. I don't have to have a deadline until June 28th. Is that what it says?
Yes.
If I read this quickly.
So if anybody's interested, we need to submit a nomination form. You have to have a resolution of support by the board, and you have to submit that to them by Friday, June 28th.
Okay, so bring this up at a later date.
Yes, but I mean, I think I would like to continue in the position, but I want to look at a few things.
Okay.
And
So we'll re-agendize it for a meeting in June.
in June,
Okay.
first one maybe.
All right,
Thank you.
Moving on, General Manager's report?
Yeah, just one of them, the first one's a little bit long. So the city of San Marcos recently announced that they will be embarking on a general plan update. In order to focus the effort, they want to establish a general plan advisory committee, and it's going to have up to 13 individuals representing various interests throughout the city and surrounding areas that they think will be affected by the update. And the city did identify Vallecitos as being one of those 13 members. They would like Vallecitos to sit on that advisory committee. They plan to meet monthly, but that's initially. Over time, they may meet more or less frequently depending on how well things are going. They do intend to retain the services of a consultant that will do most of the heavy lifting, but they are looking for a representative to engage in some fairly technical issues. It's up to this board as to who we want to nominate. They did ask for us to notify them by this Friday, May 17th. So it'd be nice if the board can express if one of the board members would like to be our rep.
I volunteered.
I'm sorry, what?
I volunteered. When it came up, we saw it, and I volunteered, but I thought, very interesting.
So that's one of the questions I was going to ask, is it limited to one person?
Yes.
It is. They want one person per agency. They are looking for somebody to roll up their sleeves and get into the technical issues. They stopped short of saying it should be a staff person, but they want the person to realize that you need to understand the complex technical issues. But having said that, it's the agency's choice who they put on there.
That's why I asked the question, because to me it makes sense for an agency such as ours to have one staff member and one board member.
When it came up at the committee meeting, ad hoc meeting, there is the opportunity to show up as a public member and put your 2 cents worth in. So it's not as though there is an opportunity for either board members and/or if we select a staff member to show up in the public, that's still a possibility. And I will let you know that I certainly will be there as part of the public. So, letting Director Martin, President Martin have the full seat, I have no problem with that.
Anyone else?
Well, I would say, I think it would be great if it was a staff member who could deal with all of the details. But because I already know that our board members, a number of them will be there and will speak up. That's just my preference. I think there's a lot of details when these things come forward to us all the time that we couldn't answer without staff.
So,
Yep.
I'd like to have, Glenn, if you could follow up with them and see if it's possible to have one staff member and one board member be part of that from our group. If not, then I would support our current board president to serve in that capacity.
Okay?
Do we need to take a vote?
Nope.
Correct.
No. This is just giving a name to a committee. That's all it is. Second item, work in San Marcos Boulevard, just to give the board a heads up, tonight, starting at 8 o'clock, Vallecitos staff will be working in San Marcos Boulevard, westbound, right in front of, I think it's called the Movement Church, right just east of Discovery intersection.
Right near the lift station.
There's some work we need to do in there, and it'll actually occur over 2 nights. The first night will be tonight, where we're actually dig down and expose it, and then we'll plate it, and then next Wednesday, we'll go in and actually complete the repairs.
Is it sewer?
It's water. Ed's still here. So Ed's here if you have any more specific questions about it, but I just want to let the board know that we will be out there. They'll start at 8 o'clock. They'll be closing down a lane of traffic, I assume, and they'll probably have traffic control removed by the time the morning rush hour starts again.
Which is 5? 5 o'clock, 5 a.m.?
Yeah, definitely the plan is to get out of there by 5 a.m. so we're not impacting traffic at all.
I know the city has an ordinance.
Yep.
Yeah, we worked with the city and we made sure we had our traffic control and our right-of-way permit and all that in place before working tonight.
I've been, the last few days, I've gotten up a little early for some unknown reasons, and unbelievable the amount of traffic that's on San Marcos Boulevard, Rancho Santa Fe, early in the morning. Everyone going west.
Yeah, it's actually a valve we're replacing for the Movement Church's fire service. So the valve's broken, they need to do some work on their fire service, so we're trying to get to it as quick as we can so they can do their work.
Great, thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Ed. And the last item I had is just to inform the board that our annual financial audit will be kicking off June 17th, I think is the date. So it's a busy time for Wes and his group. They demand a lot of documents, and they'll be scurrying around here looking through our financial records, and when the audit is all done, we'll report the findings to the board. So that's all I have.
Thank you. District Legal Counsel.
I don't know if any of you have been following the Agua Caliente litigation out in the desert. It's a federal case, and it raised an initial issue of whether tribes have reserved rights to groundwater. There was an old U.S. Supreme Court case, Winters, which established that at the time the government created reservations, that they had reserved water rights to the tribes relative to riparian rights, but it had never been litigated in California or anywhere else whether the tribes had reserved rights to groundwater basins like out in the desert where it's checkerboarded. The court found that the tribes did have a reserved right to the groundwater. That led to a second phase where the tribe was seeking to collect damages from all of the water agencies relative to overpumping, recharge with Colorado River water, degradation of the groundwater basin, etc. The court recently found that the tribe had not been damaged, so it's a major victory for those water agencies out there. And the court found that even though the tribes had a reserved right, those rights had always been satisfied by the agencies, and the tribes had not been unable to use their rights, so there was no damage phase. So hopefully that will lead to the conclusion of at least that large federal case that's been pending since 2013. So that's all I have to report.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. We're going to move on to San Diego County Water Authority.
Actually, the biggest issue we just spoke about, next meeting is a week from this Thursday, and I don't have the agenda yet, so I'm not even sure what the topics are.
Great, thank you. Encino Wastewater.
We had our capital committee meeting this morning. A couple of things took place. One, a little bit of a surprise. We have ourselves the parcel that we are trying to gather some revenue from, and so we met with the city of Carlsbad. The good news is pretty much anything we want to do, we may do on a temporary basis while we're getting our ducks in a row for a recycled facility. The bad news is if we spend more than $60,000, which staff at Encina believes is virtually anything, we have to go to the Coastal Commission, which is a 12 to 18 month program. And so we're going to be, and short of lay down area for construction or that sort of thing. It's gonna be a little slow before we get anything accomplished. And that was the big item for this morning.
Interesting. Policy and Finance Committee, they met. I wasn't there. I was up at Aqua, so I don't have anything to report on. Standing committees.
Finance?
Finance.
So the Finance Committee met on just 2 days ago, Monday, and much like what we heard earlier with what Encina has been discussing with regards to their policy around their unfunded accrued liability on their pension, that was the primary topic of our meeting, and staff presented a few different options for consideration, and we kind of, I think we took, 4 or 5 different options and then shrunk it down to 3 or 4. Like, I think we got rid of one of them. And then all of the options are going to be presented to the entire board here soon.
Okay, excellent. Move on to director's reports on travel, conferences, seminars. We'll start with Mr. Hernandez.
Yes, I attended the Aqua Conference, and a good conference. Attended the cannabis, as you can imagine, the breakout session, and that 12 acres out in the valley looks prime for cannabis as soon as the county gets their act together. But yeah.
I'll do on the JPIA, which precedes Aqua, and it was all good news from them. They don't really see our rates going up at all. As a matter of fact, they're fully funded in their PERS, or what they would call super funded, which is not a bad place to be, but only by about $80,000. So that just comes back as a lower rate to us. There may be a tick going up with the fires that we've had, but as far as the property and, the workman's comp, that's down. Doing a good job. No rate increases for health. So the JPA is doing very, very well, and they did nominate, our nominations didn't hold up as to who they appointed to the offshore board. I can't think of the name of it, but the board will be in Idaho.
Utah.
Yeah, Utah, yeah. It was Paul Davy. He didn't make either one of them, but, and they don't ever tell you. Well, I said to Paul on his way out, I said, well, better luck next time. He says, this is my 4th time. I went, oh, okay, Paul.
It's a captive insurance company, not an offshore.
Thank you. Yeah, well, it's off California shore. It's a captive. That's all I have.
All right, I attended the Aqua Conference last week as well. Just real quickly, I attended the Energy Committee meeting, Water Quality Committee meeting, which I'm on both of those committees. I attended an Energy Committee program on the economics of achieving greenhouse gas emissions reductions. I attended a groundwater sustainability update on goals and challenges, water industry trends program on, Ed, you'll like this, on developing the next generation of water system operators. That was pretty interesting. I attended a statewide issues forum on safe and affordable drinking water, and that was a debate kind of the water tax versus the establishing a trust from budget surpluses. So that was pretty interesting. The keynote speakers were really good. For the 2 luncheons, it was Joaquin Esquivel, Chair of the State Water Resource Control Board, and Jared Blumenfeld, Secretary of Environmental Protection for Cal EPA. And then the other kind of keynote was at the Friday breakfast. That was Carla Nemeth, Director of DWR. And what I got out of, they were all very interesting. When I got all 3 of them, seems to be a new spirit of teamwork in Sacramento. It's kind of summarize it as that. At least it sounded promising, so we'll see.
A lot of young blood.
Yeah.
I mean, they're in there. A lot of young blood, they're all in their 30s. You know, it's like, wow.
Yeah, so it seems to be new energy with the Newsom administration, and it seems like a renewed. And the other thing that was interesting was for the Bay Delta issues, that they're really pushing for voluntary agreements, which may unstick the problem up there, may get something done. So I guess we'll see.
Dr. Evans? Okay, do we have director's comments, future agenda items?
Are we talking about
Oh,
this?
yeah, go ahead.
So I don't know if it needs to be a future agenda item, but all of the board received this on our desk tonight when we came in. It doesn't say if there's a cost associated with this. I don't know if we, it's an event by the, what group is this? The North County, San Diego North Economic Development Council. It looks like they're gonna have an elected officials network event at Maricosta College on June 27th. Can we just add that to our calendars and
Yep.
for those who are interested? It doesn't say there's a cost or.
I didn't see the flyers.
Would you like to read this real quick, or? No, it doesn't. It's 3 to 5. I would like to go, but I'll actually be at the Water Authority.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna attend.
Yeah, I think I might be interested. Okay.
Seeing no other business?
Yeah. Future agenda item?
Yeah.
If you can believe it or not, South Lake. I actually went out there and they're grading for the parking lot. I spoke to the superintendent. He is doing what he can. There are little minor adjustments. He's back into the city for engineering approval. I spoke with the city this morning while I was there on another matter. They're gonna look into it, see if they can expedite that. It's probably gonna be 60 days, maybe 90 before it gets paved and the parking lot's in. But at least they're cutting the area in. So I would like to see we were told that the city manager was gonna come and speak to us the first quarter, and here we're already gonna be in June, so I don't know if we can lasso him, drag him here to hear what he has to say.
What I can share with you is I spoke with Mr. Griffin, and he said he doesn't feel comfortable coming here to give an update on the status until we have the agreement amended. And that's been a holdup, and quite frankly, it's been in my just time to get to the agreement.
Okay, well.
I'll try to find the time to sit down with Mr. Gilpin and iron that out, and that'll hopefully allow Jack to come in and give an update.
Well, I'm feeling about the same way I do with the Water Authority and that issue, because after 13 years, a couple of paragraph modification isn't holding Jack up. And I mean...
The other Jack.
Jack. But, so that's the first thing. Second is I would like to see if there's any sense in having a joint meeting with the city in some future board meeting. I have no idea what agenda or anything like that, but we haven't had one in a number of years, and maybe we should have one.
So you had brought that up previously, and I spoke with Jack about that as well, and he said until they know what topics you want to discuss, they're not inclined to get together just to get together. He's not against it, he just says, well, what is it the district wants to discuss? So I think that's a fair request.
Well, and if I may interject, if you remember the two that we had were at the beginning when everything got changed around, and then that was Jim Desmond's feeling, and Rebecca's feeling is, why are we having a meeting together? You know, what's on the agenda? What is there? There's nothing to do other than, hi, how are you? Let's have a meet and greet, not have a meeting out of it.
Well, that kind of moves to my next one then. I'd like to see if we could get a policy committee meeting this month identified, and perhaps we could talk about an agenda at that policy meeting in addition to, I'm going to bring up the removal of plastic cups and bottles from our district. And so we could discuss that at the policy meeting. So those are the three items I have.
If I can just chime in off of the South Lake thing, with the parking lot being near completion, it sounds like 90 days, you said?
Well, he was very non-committal, but based on what I saw, 90 days I should have that thing done.
It's safe to say probably by the end of summer, it's going to be, everything's going to be open.
You would think so.
Maybe this fall?
Yeah.
Well, even the end of the year, whenever it occurs, it seems to me it's South Lake's property of Vallecitos, and I think we're doing a really nice thing for the community by leasing it to the city for $1 a year. I suspect when this area, this recreational area opens up, there's gonna be some sort of either ribbon cutting ceremony or some sort of something around that. I think the board should be part of that, so I don't know if that's appropriate to ask the city to be involved in that, but
Absolutely.
it's our lake.
Yeah.
And we're, it's the people's lake, but we're giving it to the city for $1 a year. I think we should be part of that.
Absolutely.
And I wanna see on our budget where that $16 has been accounted for.
Yeah.
Which $16?
It's been 16 years according to Jim.
Oh, okay.
We should have gotten 16 bucks.
We'll get on that.
And then the other thing along the lines of the meeting with the city council members, I don't really have strong feelings either way. If we have a meeting, that's great. If we don't, that's fine too. But Director Martin, actually, I don't know if you brought this up to everybody yet, or if it was just something that you and I were talking about, but we do have a couple of new council members over at the city, and at the very least, I think they might benefit from a private tour, if you will, a small group tour, not one of our big group tours of our district's facilities, so they can learn a little bit about exactly what we do and how we do it and where we do it. And that might be a combination, obviously, we would have to tap into the expertise of these two fine gentlemen here, but I think, at least, to the extent that we can have 2 board members join, I don't know if we can do 3, but if we can have 2, I think that'd be good, and then I'd like to participate in that with, and I'm still in Director Martin's idea, so he probably needs to participate too.
You're stepping all over me. I already brought it up to the general manager.
Okay.
And I also brought it up to the mayor. And they seem very interested in being able to do that.
Yeah.
So, but we need to check the time when our staff is available.
Personally, I don't think that is more than 3 members could
No, you
join
can't.
that.
No, you can't.
Why not?
Because things will be discussed.
On a tour?
It's almost impossible to, yeah. If 3 of us are in a bus, you know they're gonna be discussing things.
It would be difficult to manage the conversation where it didn't get into district or city.
But let's have the legal attorney speak on it.
Well, there are ways to do it, provided you don't have discussions about business where you're making decisions with people on the bus, so it's issue.
Much like we have at our conferences.
Right,
we
your
go to
conferences.
dinner, we get cut off.
I don't care. Everybody wants to show up, I don't care, as long as Mr. Gilpin's fine with it, I'm fine with it.
Structure it, so. I'll work with Jim Prune, see if there's a
Well, I
way to
wanna make
structure
sure that they're comfortable with it. They have a new board, and their rules are tighter than ours then.
Who's that?
And we're really talking about the 2 new board members. I mean, that's what we're really talking about. The other ones had the opportunity to see it, the mayor's seen it.
I would like to be sure that they get to see a tour of the men's locker room.
Yeah.
At the appropriate time.
At the appropriate time.
Well, it would make them feel
Clean
good
it up,
about,
guys.
make them feel good about what they spent, because that only cost $800,000.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, they're gonna be.
And I also wanted to clarify on the South Lake Open, I like your idea if there's a ribbon cutting,
Oh,
but
definitely.
Jim needs to remember it's a ribbon cutting, it's not a fence cutting ceremony. Remember the last time you were gonna bring your wire cutters?
Yeah, I've already done that once.
Oh, okay.
Ed keeps replacing the lock. Can't you just put a wire on there, Ed, and make it easier for all of us?
Put his own comment on it.
With that, any other
I
business
have one
you
other,
have,
I just have one
Mr.
question.
Hernandez? Yeah.
Is there or is there not a workshop on the 29th?
There will, yes, there is planned to be a finance, budget workshop, full board, and it's a Wednesday, right?
Wednesday at 4?
Did we pick a
Or
time?
5?
It was 5.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, and let me ask one thing, Mr. Hernandez?
Yes?
Do you need any more money for any more consultants or any reason before we close this? Yeah, I know.
You caught me flat-footed.
I know
Can I
the
answer
general,
that next time?
I know the general manager was gonna ask
You
me
know,
if I, we had my.
He's changing his ways, he didn't want to pay for that consultant at the water authority.
Yeah.
That was a surprise, I thought that was his idea.
With that, we adjourn the meeting.